Of having experienced the effects of the Second World War as a child, surviving Nazi persecution, fleeing his country, and having to work as a waiter and railway porter, to almost breaking the Bank of England, being considered one of the greatest speculators of all time, being the person who has donated the most of his personal fortune worldwide, being regarded as one of the individuals with the greatest social and political influence, and, of course, becoming a multi-billionaire. This is the story of George Soros, as told by the 1%ers. George Soros was born Georgi Schwartz on August 12, 1930, in Budapest, Hungary, into an affluent Jewish family. His father, Tivadar Soros, was a lawyer and Esperantist author, and his mother, Elizabeth Soros, née Schlossberger, was a homemaker. Soros grew up in Budapest during a tumultuous period, experiencing the Nazi occupation of Hungary during World War II. Being of Jewish descent, Soros and his family faced significant challenges and dangers during this time. Soros's parents did everything in their power to protect their family, including obtaining false identity documents to evade capture by the Nazis, which helped dozens of Hungarian Jews escape Nazi persecution. Undoubtedly, this experience shaped Soros's determination and resilience in the face of adversity. The Soros family changed their name from the German Jewish Schwartz to Soros in 1936 to protect themselves in an increasingly anti-Semitic environment in Hungary. In 1945, Soros survived the siege of Budapest, where Soviet and German forces fought house to house in the city. In 1947, his family would leave Budapest due to the Soviet Union's occupation. They first went to Paris and later settled in London. His first job was as a nightclub waiter and at railway stations. Meanwhile, he began his studies at one of the world's top business schools, the London School of Economics, where he was a student of philosopher Karl Popper. At the prestigious institution, Soros earned a bachelor's degree in philosophy in 1951 and later graduated with a master's degree in philosophy in 1954. That same year, Soros started working at London's Singer and Friedlander Bank, eventually joining the arbitrage department. Later, he applied to work at a friend's father's brokerage firm in New York. Soros achieved his goal and moved to New York to work at F.M. Mayer, specializing in European stocks. 3 years later, he moved to Wertheim & Co. His plan was to save enough money to return to England. Although there is no exact date when George Soros became a millionaire, as his fortune accumulated gradually throughout his career as an investor, it is estimated that he reached the $1 million mark in the early 1960s thanks to his success as a hedge fund manager. In 1963, the firm Arnhold and S. Bleichruder hired Soros as vice president just as new tax laws made the European stock business less viable. Nevertheless, he demonstrated his skill and determination to the extent that, in 1966, this firm entrusted him with $100,000 to start a fund where he could experiment with his strategies freely. In 1969, from that company, he created the Double Eagle Hedge Fund, worth $4 million, including $250,000 of his own capital. By 1973, the Double Eagle Fund had $12 million and laid the foundation for the Soros Fund. George Soros and Jim Rogers received returns on their capital and 20% of profits each year. In 1970, Soros successfully founded Soros Fund Management. In 1973, he resigned from managing Double Eagle and created the Soros Fund, later renamed the Quantum Fund. He became its chairman. Some notable figures who held high positions there at some point included Jim Rogers, Stanley Druckenmiller, Mark Schwartz, Keith Anderson, and 2 of Soros's sons. Beyond his financial ventures, Soros became widely known for his philanthropic work. In 1979, he founded Open Society Foundations, a network of organizations dedicated to promoting democracy, human rights, and social justice globally. Through these foundations, Soros supports various causes, including education, public health, and the fight against authoritarian regimes. His commitment to creating open societies and empowering people for change has a profound impact on communities worldwide. However, open society has faced harsh criticism from many individuals and governments who claim that Soros uses his vast power and influence to manipulate governments based on his political and economic interests. One such critic is the president of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, who regulated and criticized NGOs and organizations like Open Society that had funded journalists and politicians in the country. By 1981, the fund had grown to $400 million. His bold investment decisions caused the funds to grow rapidly, but not all of his bets were successful. He correctly anticipated the global stock market crash of October 1987, but wrongly predicted that Japanese stocks would fall the hardest. The bankruptcy of the Bank of England. George Soros gained worldwide fame in 1992 when he almost broke the Bank of England. So, I'll try to explain it in a simple way. In 1992, George Soros believed that the British pound was overvalued, meaning it had a higher value than it should. So, through his investment fund, he used his own capital and also borrowed a lot of money in British pounds from banks. It is estimated that George Soros sold £7 billion, about $10.5 billion, on what would later be called Black Wednesday, on September 16, 1992. He decided to sell these large amounts of pounds in the foreign exchange market, betting that their value would decrease. Due to George Soros's recognition, many other investors also started selling pounds because they shared the same idea, and many others did it out of panic. After all, if one of the biggest investors sells their entire position in British pounds, there must be a reason, right? The selling pressure led the British government to be unable to control the price of the pound sterling. As a result, the pound depreciated by around 15%, allowing Soros and other investors who sold pounds at a high price to buy them back at a much lower price. In general terms, Soros's profits were estimated at around $1 billion, marking one of the most successful bets in financial history. The magnitude of his operations and the impact on the market earned him the reputation of having broken the Bank of England and causing losses of around £3.4 billion to the British state, equivalent to about $6 billion. The Asian financial crisis of 1997 and George Soros's role. In 1997, the Asian region was shaken by a financial crisis that devalued the currencies of several countries and caused a deep economic recession. In this context, the name of George Soros was linked to the crisis, accusing him of speculating against Asian currencies and contributing to the debacle. Soros vehemently denied his involvement in speculative attacks, stating that his investment funds, far from benefiting, had lost billions of dollars as a result of the crisis. However, the then Prime Minister of Malaysia, Mahathir bin Mohamad, pointed to him as responsible for the decline of the ringgit, the currency of his country. While it is true that Soros's funds invested in Asian markets before the crisis, there is no evidence proving that he engaged in speculative attacks against currencies. In fact, the million-dollar losses suffered by his investments during the crisis seem to confirm his version of events. Soros recovered with early gains in internet stocks in 1999, but his investment style became more conservative following the burst of the technology bubble in 2000. By the year 2000, George Soros's wealth was estimated to be around $22 billion, and he had already donated around $3 billion to charitable causes. In December 2002, George Soros was convicted by a French court of insider trading related to a 1988 transaction involving a financial services company. He was fined £2.2 million, equivalent to $2.9 million at that time. Soros appealed the verdict, but in 2006, the Cour de Cassation, which is the highest court in France, confirmed the conviction. Soros also engaged in political activities and philanthropic efforts. In 2003, he provided initial funding for the liberal think tank Center for American Progress and committed millions of dollars to groups like MoveOn.org to oppose the re-election of Republican President George W. Bush. Later, he was a prominent supporter of Democrat Barack Obama's presidential campaigns in 2008 and 2012 and donated to Hillary Clinton in the 2016 elections and to Joe Biden in 2020. In 2010, Soros donated $100 million to the non-governmental organization Human Rights Watch. With his support for Democrats and liberal causes, Soros was frequently criticized by Republicans and conservatives, and he continues to be at the center of what many would consider conspiracy theories. George Soros continued to manage his quantum fund hedge fund during the 2000s, achieving significant returns. His ability to predict market trends led to substantial profits. A notable example was his successful bet against the U.S. real estate market on the eve of the 2008 financial crisis. Soros also heavily invested in gold during the decade, anticipating a decline in the U.S. dollar. In 2011, his hedge fund had $25 billion in family investments. In 2013, the quantum fund earned $5.5 billion, making it once again the most successful hedge fund in history. Since its creation in 1973, the fund has generated $40 billion. In 2015, his personal fortune was estimated at $24.2 billion. Conspiracy theories or hidden truths. For 2 decades, George Soros has been seen by many as a sort of puppet master, secretly controlling the global economy and politics through the Open Society and other organizations in which he has a stake. Even President Donald Trump, in a tweet, asserted that Soros was backing protests against Kavanaugh's nomination. In October 2018, Soros was accused of funding a caravan of Central American migrants heading towards the United States. In November 2018, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan denounced Soros while discussing Turkey's political purges, stating, "The person who financed the terrorists during the Gezi incidents is already in prison. And who is behind him? The famous Hungarian Jew, Soros. This is a man who assigns people to divide and destroy nations." In November 2019, lawyer Joseph DiGenova claimed on Fox News that Soros controls a large part of the U.S. Foreign Service career, the State Department, and also controls the activities of FBI agents abroad who work for NGOs. They work with NGOs. That was very clear in Ukraine. In July 2020, the president of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, after border clashes with Armenia, declared that the Armenian Revolution of 2018 was another provocation by Soros and his entourage. In March 2020, Forbes magazine listed Soros as the 162nd richest person in the world, with a net worth of $8.3 billion. He has also donated 64% of his original fortune, making him the most generous donor, when measured as a percentage of net worth. As of 2023, Soros's fortune is estimated at $6.7 billion by Forbes. George Soros is 93 years old and is increasingly withdrawing from public life. Although behind the scenes, he continues to make moves. That's why he decided to pass on his entire economic, political, and influential empire to his son, Alexander Soros. He announced early on that he will focus his efforts on preventing Donald Trump from reaching the presidency. This way, the family's agenda will continue to be implemented by his successor. So tell us, what do you think of the story of George Soros? Do you believe that everything said about him and his political agenda is true? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss our upcoming videos.